Well, I'm James Butler, and this is Butler Farms. We've been around ever since 1869. The property that we own now, as my great-grandfather purchased it, and so we've had it since 1880. I was raised just a couple doors down. That's where my father's house was. And so as long as I can remember, there's been farming. Now, we were a lot smaller. My dad had, it was 11 acres in our home place down there. But we raised pigs and cows, a few chickens, did a little gardening. So like any kid on the farm, I had the chores of getting in the wood and helping with the feeding and what have you. And then as I got older, on my day, I'd feed before I went to school, and would leave school and go pick up feed, and we fed way to our hogs, and then go to track practice. And then it'd be time taking the market. I'd load up feeder pigs in the morning and take them to market before school. But I remember one thing so distinct about my farming career back then. When I went to college, I had $3,000 in my savings account, and this was like 1980, and so that was a lot of money. I haven't had $3,000 since then, but I was able to save that up, through farming. So as long as I can remember, it's been a part of what we've done and what I've done. When I went to college, I kind of left, and my dad's an interesting kind of guy, so I didn't farm with him. And then as his health started to fail, and I came back in and started taking over, and by that time it had run down a bit, and so started rebuilding and refencing, as well as clearing land all over again, because a lot of it had grown up as his health had declined. And then I got the bug again, full grown. So I'm out here every day. If I'm not here, I've got a parcel about 18 acres in Shelbyville. Totally farm about 58 acres, I think. So pretty much every day I'm somewhere, in addition to my other two jobs.
Well, how do you balance that? Having, what are those other two? Well, if you'd like to discuss those, what are those other two jobs, and how do you balance all of it, really?
Oh, I don't know balance. I stink at that. You don't believe me, you can ask my wife. But I've been working in a pallet company for about 26, 27 years now. And then I've been pastoring for about the same time. At one time having two churches. As of the first of this year, I resigned from one of them. So I just have one church. So someone talks about, well, it's Friday. I said, for me, that just means 2 working days till Monday. So I'm pretty much going all the time.
So, I guess, someone who's got a full-time job, I guess, why is it that you do the other two? Why are you a pastor? Why are you a farmer? Is it more of like a labor of love?
Yeah, so it's a passion, it's a calling. I look actually my ministry as well as my farming. I think that I'm called to do both of them. I don't see me not doing either of them. I love the church. I'm a Jesus freak, and I believe that I'm called to both of them. It's just a part of my being. So what I'll do is I look forward to one day not pastoring a church per se, but knowing I'll always be active in a church, because I just believe that's the way the good Lord would have it to be.
What role has faith played in your farming?
You can't be a farmer and not believe in God, because if He doesn't send the rain or the sun or whatever, it ain't gonna happen. I believe the lessons that the stories that you see in the Bible, for instance, even Genesis, where it says you're gonna earn your living from the spot of sweat of your brow, and it says you're gonna till the earth, and it's gonna bring forth thorns and thistles. And if you can think about that, that's kind of frustrating. So you see that the natural order of things is thorns and thistles. So we try to work in concert with nature to bring forth His bounty. And unless the Lord leads you and guides you and directs you in that just ain't gonna happen. I've been working now more conscious of this term is regenerative farming. Out here we've got a whole lot of rock, and so working to build the soil, making sure that everything that we're doing is conducive to good soil health, and again working with nature. And I found out that there were some practices and some modern industrial practices that we were adopting that were not healthy for our ecosystem. So we've been more conscious of that, and just trying to bring all things together, because again, the Bible says that we were given dominion over the earth, and so we're a steward of it. Only piece of land that I think that I own is I purchased the land around the family cemetery so I could be buried there. But the only piece of land that I think that I will occupy is going to be that little square area in which they will plant me. So other than that, we're just stewards of it. So we're just trying to do a good job with it, and use it, let the Lord use it to provide for us.
Well, you mentioned sort of learning about regenerative farming. I guess since you were a young boy to now, what's been some of the maybe craziest changes you saw in the way of farming? Maybe some of the crazier things you've learned.
Well, it's like, for instance, and it's just really pretty much going back to some of the old practices. My grandfather, he's slaughtered some animals and took around and sold the meat to some of the locals, and we got away from that. Now you go to Kroger, but what we buy is not as nutritious than what we used to produce, locally. And so we've learned, like for instance, we have cattle flies, and because of the grass, the fescue that is so prominent in our area, it actually has like a toxicity. And one thing that offsets that is minerals, magnesium and what have you. And so in feeding of magnesium, they had this great idea. They said, hey, you can buy your mineral and it can have a fly control element. It will kill the fly larva in the manure. It's like, great. So that's something that we kind of incorporated. Well, then I found out that we were also killing some important stuff in the larva of the good stuff, not just the fly larva, but the productive microbes and what have you. And so it's like, oh, we got to quit that. And so just learning, synthetic fertilizers and what have you. I'm not a chemicals guy. For me personally, I try not to take any unnecessary drugs. I don't like putting chemicals in my body, but I didn't realize that I was not doing that for my soil. So I was putting the chemicals on the soil. So again, just trying to make sure I get the animals and let the process of nature eat grass and poop manure, and let the manure go back and do fertilizing and work with my microbes and all that kind of good stuff. So just little simple things like that are just very important.
Learning, what's it been like teaching? I mean, you got some kids, I believe some grandkids as well.
Mm-hmm.
What's it been like teaching them how to farm? And maybe what's the difference in teaching your kid how to farm versus a grandkid?
Well, kids were a little bit more exposed, but as you can imagine, it's the tension between the other pools of the world. One thing, until you get the bug, you see things as work. As a child, I can remember different things that we saw as work. Now, I mean, I'm crazy. I love doing these things, where the things that I was threatened about not doing, now I do them. So it's the same thing with the kids and grandkids. I'm 5th generation, and the 8th generation has been born. So we just gotta keep them exposed and then pray that they get the bug.
Do you ever see yourself slowing down any, or stopping, retiring, if you will?
Well, again, I don't envision ever retiring. I enjoy work. Again, I'm weird like that. What I will do probably will change, I'm sure. The old body, you just can't hang like it used to. Things hurt that I didn't know I had. So I'm sure that prayerfully roads will change. The kids will step up and do some things, and maybe I can pass on wisdom, or I can be the old cranky guy who points and makes their life miserable or something. But prayerfully, it'll be something that we'll pass on, and I hope to start that process, so that again with me it was kind of went full bore after my dad died. My dad was 94 when he passed, and I think a lot about what was the difference between him farming and running the farm and me running the farm. He had me. I have nobody in that role. I don't have kids in the house, that kind of thing. So prayerfully, the kids, we're trying to work to make it sustainable. Prayerfully, we'll have it in a place where it can be handed down to them without cost. Whereas for me, I had to buy out some other heirs and what have you. So we hope that it'll be a bunch of them that want to take it up, and they can make it work and fit it into their lives and their lifestyles.
And obviously it's hard, as you know, to keep a farm in the family. So even though maybe it's not been easy for you, do you feel fortunate that this farm's been able to stay in this family for so long?
Oh, definitely. When my dad died, there were 9 parts. And thankfully, my older sisters, 3 of them, allowed me to use their part along with mine as collateral to buy out everybody else, because otherwise, we could have lost it. And so yes, that is. And I remember it was, I think they lost about a quarter of it. It was at least a quarter of it when my grandfather died. I've seen the challenges of passing on from generation to generation, and we hope that it'll be easier for the next generation. Acquiring of the land was kind of interesting. My great-great-grandfather in 1869, it was like December 22nd, so I guess it was a great Christmas present. He purchased 26 acres, and he had a white cosigner, his name Harrison Smith. Haven't been able to find anything out about Mr. Smith. Don't know relationship or whatever, but he was cosigner for that original plot of land. After my great-great-grandfather died, it went, of course, to his wife, and then after she died, the property was not able to be divided, so it ended up, and I assume it was just the way that it was kind of laid out. You can imagine a house and barns and what have you. So it ended up being sold, and there was one. I think it was it seemed like it was a Mr. Smith that purchased it, kind of by auction, sort of, and then he sold it to the family of my eighth grade school teacher. And so when I was doing the research, because I was trying to buy some of that property back, and I was doing the research and found out who it was just amazing. And so she loved our story, and so she was more than willing to let me have it, knowing that it was going back into the to the original family, original owners. And we've had it ever since. And again, it's like 153 years we've been able to retain it. Walking the place with my dad, and my dad telling me little stories. Now I don't know his grandfather died before he was born. Perry Butler died before my dad was born. But him telling stories about him with his dad, and then him showing me little things and what have you. And then certain memories. My grandfather died in 1970, and so I didn't spend a whole lot of time with him, but I do have certain memories, especially like on this porch. One of my most fond memories, we had peach trees, and there was a peach tree just right over the fence, and I remember going and picking the peaches that had fallen off the tree and bringing them up. My grandfather was on the porch, and he pulled out his old pocket knife. He was cutting the rotten spots off and whatever, and so we were eating peaches, and so I remember that, and so just a couple of stories like that. That this house fell into disrepair, and so as I was putting it back together, I found some things, unearthed some things, like this old mantle over here. I had forgotten that this was here, and this old mantle actually was in the barn. And so after I found the concrete underneath, and I remembered it was there, and it all came back together, because I remember that my dad, when he tore down the old chimney, that kind of thing. So it's amazing how little things come together. So yes, it is a connectedness. And then when I walk it, and I know that Perry Butler walked it, it's just, like I said, it's just amazing. So yeah, I feel very much connected to this place. Yeah, well, Perry also, he was illiterate, but he wanted something better for his children. So he started a church and a school, Butler Chapel. It was a Methodist Episcopal church. And then there was Butler School, and they were all just where the house is, to the left of the barn up there. That's where those two sites were located. Well, after they disbanded the church and school, the property, then my grandfather, he just kind of retained it, and he actually deeded it to a guy who worked for him. And then he sold him like another acre and a half or so back behind there. He was, raised hogs up there. So obviously in education, it was important. Well, I guess it took a generation for it to really kick. Now, I know that some of Oscar's children, and then some of Perry's children, actually taught in the school after they graduated. They taught. And then, so his great-grandson, Perry's great-grandson, I think he was one of the first to have his doctorate. And he was dean of South Carolina State College, very active in civil rights, and even is in the Hall of Fame, and I think it's Pearl Cohen Basketball Hall of Fame. All of us has taken education seriously, and most of us are active in churches. And I ended up United Methodist. We left the United Methodist Church here about a couple of years ago, but we're all Wesleyan. And so I didn't realize at the time that I had so deep of Methodist roots. But I'm Wesleyan.
So I guess, what are some of the neater things that you found that maybe you still have in possession of, and things like that?
Well, there's like just little things, like the little viewers where you look through this little thing, and I can't remember the name. You look through this little thing, and it's got these pictures that look almost like 3D. I found a viewer. Now the viewer that I have actually was my grandmother's on my mother's side, but I found where my grandfather bought one. I found the receipts where he bought one. I think he was like $11 or something he paid for it, back then. I have the receipts where he purchased a horse from a place in Readable, and it had its invoice had the name and horse picture on it, so it must have been pretty good stock or whatever. So I've got lots of documents that from purchases that my grandfather and some that my great grandfather had made, and got out handwritten deeds and all that kind of thing. Especially when you know the person, like for instance, I've got my grandfather and my maternal grandmother, when they divorced, so I didn't know them together. But when I found documents from back when they were married, and so I can see that connection, and it's just. I don't know. I can't describe the emotion and what it feels like when you see something on paper, but yet you recognize that you know these people, and so it's like a getting to know them better, and that's what I love about the bag of documents that I've been taking and going through that my grandfather owned. Certain things I didn't know. They're like receipts where he purchased supplies, groceries even. So it just kind of gives you more of an understanding of some and fills in blanks and again, it always just brings up stuff you just wish that you could ask them now in more detail. But it helps you get to know them in a way that you didn't know them. Oh, well, again, I can tell you the stories. You come in the door to the right, and you cut through, and that was the kitchen back there. And I can remember seeing my grandfather back there. My grandfather loved RC colas, and we used to feed bread to the hogs. And so when he'd go buy the bread, the day old bread from the bakery, and he'd buy, they'd have donuts and stuff in there, and so he'd always have them. So I come in and he'd offer a donut or whatever, and it might be kind of crunchy because it's day old or whatever, but just things like knowing that was a wardrobe. He'd tell my grandmother, he said, get this boy a candy bar, and so she'd go in there and dig in the bottom of the wardrobe and get him out a candy bar and stuff. So it's just all sorts of little things that you remember. Remembering it wasn't a big fireplace, is what they called a grate, and so it would just be a little fire in there throwing out just a little bit of heat, but just remembering the smells, or the TV set right over there, and coming in, he'd be watching He-Haw on Saturday evenings and that kind of thing. So all kinds of little things. Perry, I'm not for certain, but there was a photographer in the family. It would have been my great aunt. One of his daughters married a photographer, and they lived in Illinois. So the last name was Jarman. He would do photographs and what have you of family, and so some of the nicer pictures that you see were actually done at his studio, Jarman Studios. So this picture used to hang in my father's living room, and we were always running from the eyes, because the eyes seems like they used to they would like follow you. He's got those distinct eyes. And then when I redid this house, we hung that there on the wall, and then I got to thinking that's probably where it used to hang, because I'm sure that it came from my grandfather originally before my dad got it, and so it's just amazing that it got returned back to where it used to be. This is a company in Reedville, and we have a genealogist here at the Historical Society, and I've got them looking for this, just trying to figure out who these guys are. But if you notice, their little invoice is pretty unique, even with the horse and what have you on it. My grandfather was known for his horses and his teams, and just interesting that he had purchased this one. This is 1922. And then the one on the top, it was interesting. It was a 61st Act of Tennessee. It was passed by the legislature, and it was an act, and you see the date, passed March 26, 1919. It's stated that everyone who had a dog had to pay a $1 tax on it. And I was like, come on, that's kind of weird. But it was enacted to provide relief for sheep owners. I guess dogs were killing lambs or what have you. So if you had a dog, you had to register it and pay a tax on it. We call this the second hole, and this was in an old abandoned quarry. This quarry was put in operation. They used this quarry to get the rock. Apparently, the rock here is good for road building, what have you. The way it crumbles and what have you, it makes good rock for the foundations of roads. And so they opened these quarries and built the Woodbury Turnpike. And then after the quarry was shut down, there was gravel and what left over. And my grandfather used his wagons and teams and what have you. And my neighbor over there says he eventually bought a truck and did basements and driveways and used it for a source of revenue. But growing up, it was, you can just imagine for kids, this was a playground, climbing the big hills of rock. And there was one area that had a large flat rock that was had about a 2-foot raise, and we call that the stage. And so we get on the stage, and that's where we would perform and have our nights at the Apollo and what have you. There were other areas, like one had these little rocks that were almost like chairs. And that was like our big living room, and we'd go and we'd sit in there. It was just great. And then when I got my BB gun, you could put cans up on the rocks and take my little BB gun and have to save the world from the various raids and what have you. But then I think it was 1999, 2000 is when they built the new highway. And so I went to the road contractor and I asked him, I said, how about I trade you some rock for some dirt? So he came and took a look at it, and he said, no, that rock that you got piled up there, he said, that's actually the rock that wouldn't break from the last road. He says, but what we can do though, if you'll allow us, we'll reopen the quarry, we will buy the rock from you, and when we get done, we will put you 3 feet of dirt in the bottom. So this land that you can't use, you can actually grow some grass there. So I was like, hey, that's a deal. But they actually underestimated the amount of rock that the project itself would produce. So they ended up taking 100,000 tons out, and then they ended up with enough rock to fill the hole back up. I mean, after they had taken it as big as it already was, and then they took 100,000 tons out, so you can imagine how much they expanded it. They had enough refuge that they filled the hole back up and then covered it with dirt. So it was a good deal for us all along. And Dad used it to remodel the old home place there, and we ended up with some grass, place where we all had rocks. But we still also missed the hole though, because it was kind of cool playing there.